Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you here this afternoon. My name's Julia Fenby. I am Education Officer for Creativity with Education Scotland. And I shall be introducing our presenters shortly. But first of all, just a little housekeeping to remind you that this session is being recorded. So please keep your microphones switched off and also your cameras switched off. And we would love you to share in the chat. And if you have questions, please post them in the chat or raise your virtual hand and we will pick up on that. Thank you. So I'm especially pleased to be introducing this session because I work closely with Madeleine, who's one of the presenters, and we've been working together for quite a few years through the National Creative Learning Network, which is a national professional learning body who play a key role in delivering Scotland's Creative Learning Plan. And that is a plan which is supported by all of our national learning bodies with a shared vision, which is that education in Scotland would enable everybody to recognise and apply and develop their creativity to help them thrive in what we know is a really complicated and complex world. And the work that we're going to hear about this afternoon is funded through a partnership funding which Creative Scotland and Education Scotland both contribute to, and that is called the Creative Learning Network Fund. And this project was funded last year with key aims of that fund, which were focused on learners' well-being through creativity and arts experiences, and also it aimed to support learners to directly influence more of their own creative learning and creative learning experiences. And this project is a great example of both of those things. So I am delighted now to introduce Madeleine Conn, who is Argyll and Bute's Cultural Coordinator, and Nils, Aksnes and Keira Anderson, who are from Design Studio, Make and Do Studio.
Thank you very much, Julia. It's really lovely to be here and it's lovely to see everybody here today. And it's really great to have an opportunity to talk about this project as part of the Scottish Learning Festival. As Julia said, I'm Madeleine. I'm the Cultural Coordinator for Argyll and Bute Council, and I'm joined by Nils and Keira today. We also delivered this project with a creative writer called Linda Cracknell. Unfortunately, she can't join us today, but we will be talking about the work that she did as part of the project. And I should say as well that we're planning to include time for questions at the end of the session. So if you could add any questions to the chat, or there'll be an opportunity to raise your digital hand at the end if you've got any questions about what we were doing, what we've been talking about today. So the Designing Our Outdoor World project, as Julia said, was delivered through Creative Learning Network funding, which was principally concerned with using creative approaches to address negative impacts of the pandemic on learners' health and well-being. And Julia also mentioned that associated income, which is about creative agencies, about learners directly influencing their own creative learning. And what we wanted to do through this project was address the following question. So if I could ask you to go on to the next slide, which was, how do we encourage pupils and teachers to creatively engage with their outdoor spaces to support pupil well-being and engage young people in their learning? The previous year, as part of the Creative Learning Network, we delivered a project called Writing Our Outdoor World, and that was looking at creative writing as a way of exploring the outdoors. And what we found was that it had a really positive impact on the people that took part. So what we did was workshops, CPD and video resources, but we found that during a period of social isolation and increasing amounts of time spent online, the benefits of developing creativity skills in and in response to outdoor spaces, and crucially the importance of play and experimentation and collaboration was hugely beneficial in terms of learners' mental health and well-being. So we really wanted to develop the learning from that project, and to look at learners being the collaborators rather than as creative practitioners being collaborators rather than the leaders of creative projects. So we worked with Nils and Keira and Linda on a project in 2 primary schools in Dunoon. Both of these schools were had a high percentage of pupils with that were resident in areas of social and economic deprivation. So we worked with 55 primary school pupils in total that were in primary 5, 6. And we wanted to explore how creative approaches to outdoor spaces could impact on learners' mental health and well-being. And we wanted to use design thinking and creative writing to provide opportunities for pupils. And we worked over a period of 4 days in each school.
Madeleine, I think got muted there just at the end.
Oh, I did. Thank you.
You said 4 days.
4 days, thank you, over a 6-week period. So really keen to work with Nils and Keira to look at how we could use design thinking, enabling young people to think of themselves as problem solvers and develop their own sense of agency. And we were really keen for there to be an overlap between the creative writing work and the design work, and I'll come back to that creative writing work in a little while. We planned for the project to be delivered outside as much as possible. You can see in the photograph at the top, that's Linda. It was in January to March, which was quite challenging, but we wanted the kids to be outside as much as we possibly could be, because we wanted them to really respond to their outdoor environments. I'm going to hand over to Nils and Keira now to introduce themselves and to talk a little bit more detail about the design thinking approach.
Great, thanks Julia and Madeleine. So yeah, hello. We are Nils and Keira, we're both designers, but from slightly different backgrounds. So I'm a product designer and Keira's background is service design. But at the core, we would both say that we're problem solvers, and also part of our practice is design education. So kind of teaching and sharing the sort of problem solving skill set that we use to others.
So we want to start you off today just by posing a bit of a question for you to think about as we go into this. For you and from your own perspective, your own experience, what is creativity for you? Maybe actually if you want to respond to this in the chat, please do. What does creativity mean to you? What is creative learning? And on top of that, how are you personally creative in outdoor spaces? Are there any moments in your day, your week, your month that you take to be creative in an outdoor space? What might that look like? And how are your pupils creative in outdoor spaces already? What do you see them doing? How do you see them interacting with the outdoor world in a creative way? If you have any responses to that you'd like to share in the chat, please do. And otherwise, just have a think on it as we go through our slides.
And yeah, we'd like to kind of explore this question as well in today's session. So how might people use design thinking in their outdoor spaces to support health and well-being? So what's the link here between design thinking skills, which we'll talk about, and the outdoor spaces and pupil health and well-being? We think that the creative agency, which both Julia and Madeleine have mentioned, is the answer, is the link here between these three. And we're thinking about the ability to look at a space or a product or a playground and think, why is it like it is, and maybe think it doesn't have to be like this, or how could it be made better, and how could it be made better for all the people who use it? So gaining creative agency, and importantly, I think that bit about how could it be made better for everyone. So agency with empathy, considering their own needs as well as the needs of all the other people or things that are in that outdoor space. So just might be helpful to define a little bit about what we think we mean by design thinking. So we've intentionally created quite a broad and open definition here, which we think could be applied to problems in lots of different contexts, which we'll come back to, but product, service, built environment, etc. And really it's about a process of problem solving, where in this project the learners were tasked with defining the outputs themselves. And that was through exploration, observation, experimentation. We didn't know the end point at the start, and that came up when we were kind of planning the project and talking to teachers and stuff. What's the end going to be? Well, we didn't know that, and we didn't know what the pupils would end up creating, and we didn't even know what specific problem they would try to solve at that point. And that was important to keep that open. And really, I think, again, to emphasize the link between this idea of creative agency and the health and well-being. So having the creative tools to meet challenges in different contexts. I think that's where we see the creative agency having a positive impact on pupils' health and well-being. So the process that we use in our work to apply that kind of design thinking approach is the Double Diamond framework, which is this was developed by the UK Design Council in 2004. Some of you might be familiar with it, but the two diamonds here, the double diamonds, they represent areas of divergent thinking, so exploring an issue widely or deeply, and then convergent thinking, where we're taking focused actions. So starting from a design challenge, we then have a phase of divergent thinking called Discover, where that's about helping people to understand what the problem is, rather than kind of basing it on assumptions. So everyone will read a design brief and then have some assumptions, but really that first phase is about really understanding it in detail, and then using that insight in the define phase to really define the challenge in a way that is most appropriate. So the challenge as originally set to you might not be appropriate to what you then need to go and do to solve it. So really redefining that challenge. The second divergent phase is develop. So that's about trying to develop lots of answers to the clearly defined problem, looking broadly for inspiration and working, co-designing with a range of different people to develop lots of possible solutions. And then finally, delivery involves testing solutions at small scale, quickly, rejecting the ones that don't work and improving the ones that do. It's not a linear process. You might go back after having redefined the problem and redefine it again. You might find you need to go and speak to more people. Or you might find that once you've built and tested ideas, you might want to run that through again and really just, it's kind of a thorough, non-linear, iterative process. And finally, the principles that the framework outlines, there's 4 core principles. So that's about putting people first, starting with an understanding of people and how they relate to the problem and what their needs and strengths and aspirations are. Communicating both visually and inclusively, so helping everyone involved in the project to gain a shared understanding of the ideas as they develop. To collaborate and co-create, so I mentioned this already, working together with a broad range of people, those who are directly affected by the problem, those who have to work on various aspects of the problem as part of what they do. And then to re-emphasize, iterate, to do that a lot, to spot errors early and to avoid risk and build confidence and things. So that broadly is the process that we use in our work as we apply design thinking to problems when we're trying to solve them. What did this look like in terms of the Creative Learning Network project? So we introduced pupils to this double diamond model, and together we populated a version of the framework with some of the methods that they might use in each phase. And I'm not going to go into the details on this one, but one thing I wanted to draw out is that the idea method, coming up with ideas, that's not until the 3rd phase. I think common misconception is that we start with an idea, but as I hope I've explained, it's about gaining a thorough understanding of the problem, which then enables us to come up with a plurality of ideas and not just the first idea. We started with a design challenge. So how can this outdoor space make all of its users happy and healthy? And this led into a discussion with the pupils about who uses the outdoor spaces, not just people, but also the nature and the animals, etc., how they use it, why they use it. And also a discussion about well-being and what it means to be happy and healthy and thriving. But then we moved quickly into the space itself. So again, we had this discussion, but that was maybe based on some assumptions. So we moved into the space and we asked people to identify spaces or objects or experiences which are happy and healthy and thriving, and then also places that were unhappy and unhealthy. And we really challenged them to understand rather than simply assume. By exploring the spaces. And we used a variety of methods, which we'll go on to explain a little bit more detail a bit later on. In the define phase, then we used the insights that we'd gathered from the discover phase, and we really tried to define that challenge and who we were designing for and what their needs might be. Then in the second diamond, so the develop phase was about encouraging lots of possible solutions. So we tried to, again, in the context of the outdoor space, so going out into the outdoor space and using a variety of methods to develop lots of ideas, focus on quantity, and just not falling in love with the first idea and just developing lots of different approaches and thinking. And then finally, in the deliver phase, it was about testing out solutions and building things that the pupils could test with their classmates and really use. And then encouraging
Yes, the Gender 10 toolkit, East Ayrshire Council, NHS, Arran, East Ayrshire Women's Aid, Education
Scotland. To mute themselves if they haven't already. Thank you. Yeah, and just encouraging an iteration of that idea development where they would learn from their first test with their pupils, with their classmates, and build an improvement. So back to our definition of design thinking, we're going to look in a bit more detail now at each of the three areas that are highlighted here. But also Madeleine mentioned that creative writing was a part of this project, and that was really interesting because that was it's not obviously our background, but it's a really great linking with the observation phase of the design process. So Madeleine's going to speak a bit about the creative writing stuff that Linda did, who sadly can't be here today. And then Keira is going to talk about some of the other tools that we used in the observation phase. So hand back over to Madeleine.
Don't forget to unmute yourself, Madeleine.
Thank you, Keira. Desperate to mute myself today. I don't know what that's about. So Linda, as I said, had delivered the Writing or Outdoor World project, and she's a writer for whom the outdoor world is a really important part of her process. She does quite a lot of writing about walking and inspired by the outside world. So what we wanted to do is, before we started the design process, we wanted to look at observation and playful experiences in the outdoor world that were driven through creative writing. As Nils said, in design thinking, problem solving is led by observation and experimentation. So we wanted to have a couple of days with Linda looking at the outdoor spaces and responding to it. But also this notion of exploring a problem from the perspective of all users, and for the outdoor spaces, we gave the schools the opportunity to decide which outdoor spaces they want to look at, whether it was somewhere that they used for outdoor learning that was a little bit further away from the school, or whether it was their playgrounds, and both the schools chose their playgrounds to focus on. But it's that idea of re-looking at the space and thinking about it more critically, rather than just how they would usually work or play in that space. So bear with me a second. Each pupil was given a dedicated notebook, and they could record their own ideas and their own writing in there. And what we focused on initially was sensory observation of the space. So thinking about experiencing through the senses, but primarily through not just through sight. So thinking about how the project might sound or smell or taste. And they started by creating sound maps of their space, so placing themselves in the space and then thinking about what they could hear around it and where it was in relation to them, and not just thinking about using words that they already know, but almost trying to record the sounds through their own made-up words, if you see what I mean. And what they then went on to do was build on that observation to think about objects in the space from a different point of view. So if you can see in the top left-hand corner, there's a little label hanging from the tree, and what the pupils were asked to do was to ask a question of a living thing in the space. So I think this one says, why do your leaves not fall off? And the idea was that they were making small interventions in the space that the other pupils would then come along and ask questions and wonder why they were doing it and what they were trying to find out. What they then went on to do was to create riddles. So again, with that kind of playful notion, thinking about how you would embody a different user of the space, so a tree or a caterpillar, and give people clues about who you were through your writing. And the idea would be that then you would perform this riddle to somebody else, and they would have to guess. So they would have to think about what characterized that creature, and also think about giving it a voice. So would it be grumpy or happy or reluctant, or what kind of voice would they have? And it was really clear that from the beginning there was a little bit of reluctance to do their own writing, but once they started and once they had that opportunity, it's almost like it's a puzzle that they're creating. So there's a challenge there about keeping kind of clues back and like revealing the best clue at the end. And then they had to perform those riddles in the class, and they all wanted to come up to the front and perform their little riddle and for people to guess, and they created really amazing writing. In the following session we delivered with Nils and Keira, and we introduced this idea of a mysterious character. So there was a letter that was found, because we had quite a lot of discussion about what the brief, how we're going to define the brief for the young people, how were they going to understand what we were asking them to do. So we had this, Linda had this idea of creating a character who'd been watching the space for a long time and had asked the pupils to help her with finding out what they could do to protect it. So they created little birch plaques that you can see in some of the images, and they wrote to this creature that had been watching, thinking about the needs and wants and the wishes of the living things in the space. I'm going to hand back over to Nils and Keira now to talk about the design just now.
Brilliant, thank you, Madeleine. Yeah, so a lot of what Madeleine's talked about there that the pupils did in the creative learning part, the same skills of observation, exploration, and trying to understand the needs of others were also what we were asking them to do. So it's almost a bit false that we've separated them. It's only for sort of logistical reasons, I think we have, but the skills are relevant. So I'm going to show you some more around what we did there. So yeah, these are, I guess, the three sort of fundamental aspects of design thinking that Nils was talking about. The first being observation, which is something you do throughout any problem-solving process, but particularly at the beginning. And it's about observing and documenting the space. So looking at the space through the eyes of all users, not only from your own perspective, so trying to gain that alternative perspective. And it's not about, this documentation isn't about drawing a great picture, taking the best ever photograph, or writing the best piece of prose, but it's about seeing and understanding and expressing that in a way that means something to you, so you can draw meaning from it later. Yeah, so we're asking the pupils to use all of their senses. Madeleine gave a really great example there of the soundscape that they had to write about. We also had them interact with the space and in a variety of ways to try and feel it. In January, your senses are particularly heightened, I think, when you're outside. Cold was certainly a feeling everybody had at some point. But yeah, we encouraged this observation to happen in a number of different ways, and then to document in a number of different ways, whether that was sketching, photographing, annotating, note-taking, storytelling, interviews, a variety of things. So yeah, we the question that we'd sort of set as a whole collective was something that was how can this space help its users be happy and healthy? There we go. Thank you very much. So it was all about how all the users could thrive in that space, which I think links back to what Julia said about thriving in a complex world. And this whole project was kind of about asking them to think about how things could thrive, but also giving them skills that we hope will help them to thrive, being able to meet a challenge, look at it logically, look at it from different perspectives and meet it. So we asked them to find a positive and negative space in their playground, and to help them observe that more deeply, we gave them a variety of tools. We gave them viewfinders to help them concentrate their sketches. We had the notebooks. They were making sketches and drawings, and we also Nils is a photographic artist as well as a designer, and he works in pinhole. So we happen to use pinhole photography here, which is what's on the right hand side, and they were to create sort of composite images which laid a positive and a negative space on top of each other. But equally, you could do anything that would help to represent a space or a scene or a feeling. Sketching, it could be found objects, whatever it is that helps pupils to remember and sort of make a shortcut back to the feelings that they identified when they were observing that space. Something that acts as a visual cue or an auditory cue or whatever for the rest of the process. So these are just two nice examples of the composite images that were created. The one on the left, this was a space they really loved. They loved playing on these big farm tractor tires, but there was litter lying around, and so they took a picture close up of the litter, and that was on top of the image they'd already taken of the tire, and it's created this lovely sort of serendipitous moment. And it's things like this that came out of the observation that I think really showed the strength of that process, where there was ideas already starting to flow just by the way they documented things. So this sparked a fun conversation about different ways to collect litter and make the collecting of litter into a game rather than just a mess. And the space on the right, this was the image of the rocks that you can see in the lower half. There's a space that a certain group of pupils really loved, but they avoided the AstroTurf, and so they combined these two images, which again sparked a really nice conversation about how different spaces mean different things to different people, and they have different needs for them. So yeah, that was a really lovely way to do that. And then, of course, the major reason for doing all that observation is to help us to uncover the needs and desires of users of a particular space. So yeah, at this stage, we're trying to understand what a user requires in order to achieve a particular goal, so that we can then, as designers, design the right thing, and trying to think about needs which are both met and unmet by the status quo. So having identified the spaces they wanted to work in, we then asked them to try and identify some characters that might use that space. And it was a very broad definition. So we had both human characters, but also plants and animals and possibly even inanimate objects. And were all listed as characters and users of the space. And then we wanted them to get to this list of needs. We used a range of methods there. From interviews, again, back to observation, and also role play, and a whole range of things. So this is an example where we had them interview each other in character. So one in pairs, one pupil would take on a character. In this case, it's a seagull, and then the other would act as an interviewer and try to understand what a seagull needs and wants from a particular space. So they held these little conversations, which were both chaotic and productive, as people flapped around the classroom, but all part of the process that helped them get into the mindset of a seagull. We also did role play, so actually being outside in the space again and asking them to inhabit that space as their character would. I think these two are being woodlice, perhaps. So scurrying around on the cold, hard ground and thinking about what was missing for them. What did woodlice like? Is it a concrete playground, or is there something else that woodlice would rather find as they were scurrying around? I appreciate that I look like a drill sergeant in this photo. Yeah, it's terrible. And then finally using all the information they've collected that way to start to list a set of wishes and needs for each character. That they'll then use in the next phase of the project to help them design the right thing, to help them build something that the character actually needs and wants. And then so the final of these three fundamental aspects of design thinking that we're talking about today is experimentation. That's certainly what we call it when we are talking to our clients. But I think a better word might be play. But people don't want to pay you to play quite so often, so we call it experimentation, but it's definitely play. So so building on the research the pupils had undertaken, they then used play to iteratively develop ideas for solutions. So thinking about the problem, thinking about what they learned about their characters and what they needed and wanted, coming up with loads of different ideas as to how they might make the playground a better space for that character. I think Nils already said to avoid falling in love with our first idea. So we try and come up with lots and lots of ideas so that we don't get hung up on the very first thing that comes into our minds, and really encouraging the pupils to move from one idea to the next idea, to let an idea evolve, to explore and test multiple versions of an idea to find out what works best and what aspects of the idea are working and what maybe needs improved upon. Yeah, a bunch of ways that we did this. Some examples here. So on the left, when they already had a bit of an idea of what they thought they might want their final outcome to look like, and they did some storyboarding. So drawing a picture, like a comic strip, really, telling the story of how a character would interact with their thing and how their experience of the playground would be better as a result. But then we also were back outside and we were body storming again, so thinking with our bodies rather than our brains. And I believe this pupil is obligingly acting as a table so that his character, his friend, can try out having a table in this space in the playground. And so again, this takes very little equipment or materials, and you can just really quickly move through different ideas. The pupils really got into this super easily. I mean, it's what they do every day at lunchtime in the playground anyway, so they love doing that. And then also starting to prototype by making actual objects. We provided a bunch of materials.
Did you watch Lucy Proud?
Oh, please, it's just like not muted.
You do need to connect it. It's an hour and 49 minutes long. I went to my bed last night for an early night at 9 o'clock and I fell asleep.
If you aren't, thank you. Sorry, everybody. The joys of Microsoft Teams. Yes, so here we one set of pupils wanted a basketball net in the playground, and that seemed relatively easy to achieve, and they built this really great basketball hoop that they then put up in their classroom to practice with, but discovered they didn't have a ball. So actually the kind of crux of this idea then became, how do we create a ball that we can throw into this basketball hoop? So at first it was scrunched up bits of paper, and then somebody had the idea for paper airplane, but they didn't know how to make paper airplanes, so they had to learn how to do that. And then they were trying to improve their airplane designs and get them into the basket. Oh, sorry.
So yeah, sustainability. This was a thread that we asked pupils to think about throughout. So it's really about the consequences of their design decisions on different users, and this includes when the design is no longer needed. So just thinking again back to everyone who might use or encounter the thing that you're designing, and that does include the people who encounter it after it is no longer in use in the playground. And as an example of that, the camera that we were using is the camera that I designed and built myself, and really looking at that as an example of designing endings. So how products can be created which can be taken apart completely so that everything in them can be reused or recycled, and how we might apply this low impact kind of way of thinking to other ideas. So that's just a very brief thing on that, but we didn't want to kind of pass over that topic because it was an important thread throughout. Oh, I should have changed slide. Oh, hang on. Right, so that's just a wrapping up of our kind of overview of design thinking, very quick. Madeleine's going to talk briefly about some of the impacts of the pandemic and of the project, and then we're going to hear from some of the pupils themselves. So we've got a short video where they kind of explain their experiences of the project.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the impacts, what we were looking at was we wanted to see what the impact was on learners' mental health and well-being. The way that we assessed the impact was by gathering evidence from pupils and teachers, both in terms of kind of observation, photographs, film, but also evaluation forms, but crucially through interviews as well, and talking to the staff and the pupils about what they perceived were what they perceived was the impact of this project. We measured it against what they felt were the negative impacts of the pandemic on learners' mental health and well-being. And you can see here, you've got socialising with others, following routines, talking and listening in a large group, team working, tolerance and understanding of others, and confidence levels. It's, they're all about the same thing, really. I mean, it's about being able to work with other people. And so what we were asking them to do through this project was to collaborate and to work together. And if speaking and listening within the group was going to be challenging, then how are we going to get around that, I suppose. So what I would say was that the creative practitioners were absolutely brilliant in terms of being patient and being able to adapt the different activities for the young people, and the fact that as Keira touched upon there about the body storming, that idea of it being very physical, that the process was very active. They were never sort of sitting still at a desk. They'd identified at the beginning when we were talking about happy and thriving places, that to be happy and to be thriving would mean that you're moving, you're active, whereas to be unhappy and declining, you'd kind of be sat in one space and you wouldn't be doing anything. And that active nature of the project was really beneficial. I'd also asked the teachers about how they were currently using creativity in the outdoors to support young people in their health and well-being, and the activities they mentioned were very definite structural activities like outdoor maths or beach cleaning, litter picks on the community, where there was a definite beginning, a middle and end, but that the young people weren't necessarily driving the process. So I suppose there was a little bit of trepidation at the beginning about how, if we were offering this project that was going to really challenge the young people and they were going to be driving it, how it would impact on them. And to say as well that the I just noticed we're running out of time. Yeah, there was a little bit of trepidation about what the outcome was going to be, and this idea that we were focusing on process rather than the end product was something that the teachers struggled with, but actually the young people didn't. And in conversation the other day, we were talking about actually this idea that they could create anything, that they could absolutely let their imagination run wild, was really, really beneficial for the young people taking part. I will say that yeah, that all the activities, the creative writing, the pinhole cameras, really challenged them to think about the problem from different points of view. So that really helped with their tolerance and their understanding of others. I am going to play the video. I have got a lot more to say, but I think just to allow more time for questions, it'd be really good, rather than hearing from me about what the impact was, to hear from the young people. And there's a short video, it's about 7 minutes long, of 4 of the young people from one of the schools talking about the project from their point of view. It's a bit shaky to start with. The sound is not coming through, I don't think.
Another one, so it had like cool like shading and had like different 2 pictures merged together. I remember drawing the good thing and the bad thing like in the pictures, because you also drew them as well. But
I also remember like when you like the good place and the bad place and they merged together.
Well, the good and the bad.
Yeah, the happy place and the sad place. And I remember we did rubbish in a tire, and it looked like the rubbish was in a tire, but the tire was covered in grass, like the grass was growing on the tire.
Ours looked like a pile of rock. It was just like hidden under the ashes of the pitch.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you particularly enjoy about taking part, and did anything surprise you?
Probably nothing really surprised me as such. But
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was really fun.
I liked when we were like merging the pictures and also writing to
Mysterious.
Yeah, I remember actually seeing the pictures before they got to full colour, when they're like in a red sort of state.
Yeah.
That's what the film.
You need to.
And you look through them.
They were still being developed.
When you look through them, you can see the whole classroom.
If you look through them, they were really small.
Yeah.
Were there any parts of the project that you found challenging or difficult?
No, I don't really think so.
It was mostly just really fun.
Yeah.
There was nothing really like difficult, but some things were harder than others.
I think for me, the part where we had to sketch out our happy place.
Yeah.
Only because mine was a bit of an odd thing.
Yeah. I remember the easiest thing to do was listening to Martin. The duck.
Remember the chicken?
Martin the duck, yes, when she squeezed them.
And then you had to go completely silent or freeze on the spot.
Yeah.
Because Martin said so.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there opportunity to work together during the project?
Yeah.
We made our models.
Yeah, it was almost always working together.
So it was like teamwork.
Like a partner or something.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm not really an independent worker.
Like when we
I'm more
when we were making the prototypes and when we made the big cardboard things, those were group work.
Good. Teamwork.
Yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to help others as part of the project?
We were basically it was centered around helping like nature and helping the playground to accommodate
and animals.
loads of types.
wooden slates where we had to write to the nature
To help. This plant needs water, sun.
friends, mysterious, please help. That's the plan.
Yeah.
So the designers described themselves as problem solvers. Did you have the opportunity to solve problems as part of the project?
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes.
times.
Can you think of an example?
We were given when we tied little labels and tied them to branches of a tree that said this tree needs water, this tree needs light, or something
So
like
we
that.
had to figure out who
Mysterious
was.
They were the nature map.
You also needed to figure out how to work a pinhole camera.
You have to count an elephant
so
and
odd.
figure out how many elephants you was counting.
You had to use steps. You had to like how far your thing was.
Yeah.
Like, oh well, that's 16 steps.
Nils
used an app, I remember. He'd set
Yeah.
next to the camera and it would tell you how many
Yeah.
elephants.
Yeah.
So you'd open the pinhole.
So can you tell me about the prototype you created and who it was for? So a prototype.
I can't actually remember who the prototype was for. I remember I made like this animation where it was like the tree falls down and the plants rise up and then
the flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my prototype was like for squirrels, and it had like a little hidey hole where it had like you could put food or like they could stay in. It had like climbing bits and it had lots of different things. Yeah.
I remember when you had the piece of cardboard and you wrote your word and then you'd like decorate your word. I wrote wild and then
/ You're just like
I'm just taking this off.
So what was your prototype, Elena?
We did a Ferris wheel that was on the cars, and it had flower beds for the crows to come and sit in and eat food, and for the flowers to grow. And then I saw it was a Ferris wheel, so obviously people could go on it because I think our things were pupils, crows, and flowers. And then just so we could show how to work it, we used plastic dinosaurs to put in the cars.
Oh yeah, I remember that they were taking.
They kept falling out though. It was really annoying. Yeah, I kept having to like run back over and put them back in the car.
Did you learn any new skills?
Probably teamwork.
Sorry, Fraser, what did you say?
The pinhole camera was definitely a thing because I'm not really a person who's used many cameras. Neither am I.
Teamwork was like the main skill we used.
Good.
Probably figuring out how to make like a spinning mechanism.
Oh,
Because Nils had to come over and help us to make the spinning mechanism for the Ferris wheel.
Were your ideas and thoughts important in the project?
Oh, yeah, they included it all. So like if we said something, they would like take it and use it in what they said. They would like incorporate it into what they were saying.
Yeah. They make it use it as an example.
Did the project include opportunities to be active?
Yes.
If so, how?
Every single day they came over, we were always outside.
Yeah.
One time it even started raining,
and we were still outside.
It was like always active. 2. Yeah, always active.
I remember one of the other things to be active was we had to act as our little cards.
Yeah.
Some people didn't have to be active for that because they were just plants. But I remember.
I was a duck.
Yeah, I was a squirrel, so I had to like literally run.
I'm pretty sure I was a bird with someone else. I can't remember who it was. I think it was like me as well. We would seagulls or something.
I think we've got about 2 more minutes left of the session, so I think we've run over slightly in terms of questions, but I will make sure that we share the presentation that we've done, and if you've got any questions, please do get in contact with us. I don't know if there's time to ask if anyone's got a quick question before we finish, but I'd just like to say thanks very much to Nils and Keira for presenting this project this year, and it's been fantastic to be part of it. Thanks very much.
Thank you to all of you from me and us at Education Scotland for leading the session today. It's been really fantastic to hear from you, and especially to hear from the learners.
Yeah.
Wonderful feedback.
Thank you.